couldn't get it on the other computer, so I'm trying to get it to. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I think we have a really interesting program this morning. Let me get our PowerPoint up here. Okay, so for our agenda this morning, for the first time, we're going to have Christy Dorr here, who is the Director of Donor Impact, and Andrew Rogers, who is our new Executive Director, or not so new anymore, for the foundation. And they are going to speak to us for 10 or 15 minutes. We will go through our updates and reminders, and then we will have Kathleen Killorn introducing our speaker, Dre Abeita. And as you may have heard in the conversation going on, she is Rosalie Lucero's daughter. And she has a very interesting discussion for us this morning too. So let's see. We have two people are in the waiting room now. So why don't we go ahead and get started. And Elizabeth is going to introduce our first speakers of the morning from the foundation.
Great. Thanks so much, Lynn. Great. As Lynn mentioned, we have Andrew Rogers and Christy Dorr here today. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction. Andrew Rogers, as was mentioned, is the Executive Director for the Albuquerque Museum Foundation. He has a degree in journalism and an MBA. He previously served as the Executive Director of the River Run International Film Festival in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and also the Denver Film Society. Christy Dorr is the, as mentioned, Director of Donor Impact. She began her career right here in Albuquerque as a membership director of the Girl Scouts. She went on then to law school, a big change there, I bet, Christy, and practiced energy law. Prior to joining at AMF, she served as the executive director of the El Paso County Bar Association in Colorado. And her passions are ballet and photography. So I will turn that over to Christy and Andrew to go ahead and talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the foundation these days. So go ahead, have at it, whoever wants to talk.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. This is Andrew, and I'll kick things off. Thanks so much also for that introduction. Yeah, I started with the foundation this past February, and so it's been almost 10 months now, approaching a year. It's been a really marvelous first year, and I'm really appreciative of that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to share a couple general notes and talk about a couple of things that we're doing, and then pass it off to Christy. I think that the first thing to mention is just you know, the foundation. You know, what is the objective? What is the point of the foundation? And I don't mention this lately because I think in the past there's been some differences of opinion among the staff or the board of the foundation about what its purpose should be and what it should be accomplishing. I've said this perhaps even to some of you, and forgive the sort of flipness for which I say this. I don't mean it in any disrespect, but I view, and I think our current board views, our singular goal and objective of the foundation is to back the biggest truck of money up to the museum as often as possible. We are a fundraising focused organization. Our job is to raise funds to support the museum, to support its curators, the education program. If there's urgent needs, we're there to augment the support and to provide additional funding wherever possible. And private support from individuals, companies, and foundations is what's going to make up the bulk of the money that we receive. And of that, individuals is going to be by far the largest. That money that we receive comes to us from straight out donations, from memorial gifts, from people who join as members, either low, at entry level or at a very high level. And increasingly, we're starting to see, sort of bespoke programs, if you will, or sort of more targeted niche programs that we're fundraising for that are able to generate some support. Christy is also a new hire to the organization. I believe she started in August, and we had the organization had a couple of open positions for quite a long time since last year. So we're now filled. We're now fully staffed. And I've been working with the staff to kind of reorder a little bit some of the responsibilities. As I said, we're really a fundraising organization first. That's the primary role. We do own some art. We do own the Batten House. There's a number of things that are a little unique about this organization. Certainly its longevity and its commitment and its partnership with the museum are one. Among the things that I'm most grateful for, I think, is that in the last 10 months, we've really forged a whole new era and relationships with the museum and its staff, with Andrew and Josie and the rest of the curators, Elizabeth. Not to say those relationships didn't exist before, but really and truly, we're trying to be responsive to what's most urgent to them and be thinking ahead about how we can really impact the museum and help, create solutions. So that's just sort of the general philosophy. I wanted to just give a couple of updates on a couple of different areas of that fundraising work and kind of where that stands. One thing that a number of you likely have heard over the months or years is there's a capital campaign afoot to support the Education Center. And that has been relaunched by the board of the foundation. It's intended to fundraise. The foundation's focus is to raise really a teeny portion of the overall support. Many of you likely voted in the November elections and supported the general obligation bonds, including $500,000 to support the Education Center, plus some other money that voters approved for other things with the museum. So that's the first tranche of what's almost $10 million that's currently slated direct from the city. Additionally, the foundation pays for a lobbyist. We're going back in front of the legislature in January to try to generate support for the Education Center. In all intents and purposes, this is sort of like a within the family conversation. We're not talking about the Education Center publicly, broadly, because the way capital campaigns work, you really want to raise about 2/3, 3/4 of the money before you really go out broadly and talk about it. The reason that I'm bringing it up is because this has been so long gestating, and also it was put on hold for a year and a half because of the pandemic. There had been some work done at the beginning before the pandemic and some money was raised, but it's really only been within the foundation among its board, some of the staff of the museum and the foundation. So I just wanted to give you all the update that we are now in a sort of advanced planning stage. It's relaunched. We're still fundraising, but what we're doing now is working with starting to sort of expand the circle a little bit. We're convening groups to, ask some questions and kind of make sure we're successful in what we're doing. At the same time, we're moving boldly forward with the state legislature, hoping for support. So I would just make the specific appeal that if you happen to have any legislators who are in your extended network of friends or family, please do feel free to drop myself or Christy a note. It's always good to note those relationships. And if you ever feel comfortable saying something to your legislator, that's also very welcome. I also want to give an update because I have been asked in recent past. We also, you may have mentioned when I said we own some things, I did not mention the patio market, which is a complex over in Old Town, which we no longer own. The foundation, when I took over, literally my first week on the job, I was told, please find somebody to cut down the tree that's growing through the roof, and we have to spend $1 million to fix the roof. We're gonna have to take that out of the endowment. And that was a rough first week. I started asking some questions, and we were able to find a local buyer, somebody who also owns other properties in Old Town, who's committed to preserving the property and really moving forward and doing a lot of the necessary repairs. You know, we really have appreciated being the owners and the landlords of that property for a long time, but felt that we kind of reached the point where just couldn't provide the service, and it was going to start to be a real drain on the foundation's resources. So we found somebody to take over, and we're really grateful. It's provided a decent amount of money that we've put back into our endowment, and our board is currently looking at some other options of ways we can funnel some money directly back to the museum as a result. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is something that we'll be hitting our member magazine in January. And you may have seen a couple, if you're subscribed to our email newsletter, you may have seen a couple notes about that. And that is in this fall, we were approached by the Betzer family. Stan Betzer, who's the husband of Gay Betzer, who's a former docent of the museum in Casa San Isidro, wanted to make a donation to the museum and support education programs. And I worked with him and his family to kind of figure out what that would look like. And ultimately, they decided to create a gift that would encompass a matching gift challenge grant, basically. So they gave us $50,000 and pledged to give another 50 if we could match it, to get another 50 on our own. And we sort of thought, well, we'll launch a campaign here at the end of the year, and we'll see what we can do. But we had about a year to get it done. In less than 2 weeks, we were able to complete the match. We had so many donors step forward that it was really a great success. So that's going to end up being $150,000, which is going to go into a fund, which will annually, it's not intended to be an endowment. We're going to draw it down over 10 to 15 years. So it'll provide $10,000 to $15,000 of support directly for the education program. Dan and I worked it out. It's kind of a discretion of Elizabeth and the education program. So it's not just for the existing education programs like Magic Bus or the virtual tours that some of you have done or the take-home art activities. If the education department comes up with other new initiatives, this can also support that. So anyway, this was just my quick update. I think I've spoken a couple minutes longer than I intended, but I wanted to just give you all a short update on some of the things that we're doing and kind of let Christy provide a couple of others. Thanks so much for everybody. We'll hope to answer any questions at the end if there's anything.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Lynn, for having us today. Really excited to be here. And it's been wonderful starting to meet some of you in person at events and on some of these virtual meetings. And I look forward to continuing to meet some of you in the months and events to come. So I wanted to just let everyone know a little bit about my role here at the foundation. So I am solely focused on fundraising. We have events and membership staff. We have staff that are specifically focused on programs such as Arts Thrive. And my role is development in its entirety. So I work on raising funds to support our programs, our exhibits, and a variety of other projects, such as the capital campaign that Andrew just mentioned. So some of the things that we work on are Masterworks, the Arts Thrive program, Magic Bus, and then our annual fund and capital campaigns. The other programs that I work on specifically are our Patron Circle membership program, which is for our highest level donors who are members. And then the AM Society, which is a program that was started to recognize those individuals and families that have planned gifts to the foundation in their estate plan. So those are just some of the things that I work on, and it's been really wonderful. And I just want to thank all of you as docents. Many of you are members of the foundation. Many of you are donors, and some of you are also members of our patron circle. And it means so much to us to have your involvement and your support, knowing that you understand that the foundation provides so much for the museum, and what that means to us is we're just very grateful for all of you and for what you do for the museum. You're the front lines for our organization and for the museum, and people in the community see your passion and recognize the work that you do. And so we're just here today to say that we're grateful and thank you all for everything that you're doing for both of our organizations. And with that, if you have any questions, we'll take questions. And I also want to let everyone know our doors are open. Feel free to give us a call. Our contact information can be found on the foundation's website, and you can email us or call anytime. We're happy to answer questions ranging from programming to campaigns, or help you with events if you have event questions or need help signing up for anything. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need anything.
And Christy, I just wanted to add as well, Lynn, I really appreciated your agenda, and I liked your wolf at the top with the mask on it. And I wanted to comment that that's actually my daughter's favorite painting in the museum, and it happens to be directly across from the Andrew Wyeth Carl painting, which is my favorite painting in the museum. So I enjoyed seeing that this morning.
Well, and Shar, who, I know somebody on staff did that for us. Who was it?
Robin. Robin, who's the graphic designer.
Yeah,
Okay.
Robin did that for us.
Yes, and we were hoping that we could remove the coyote with the mask at some point, but we are still plugging ahead here and dealing with pandemic. So, but thank you. Does anybody have a question for Christy or Andrew before we move on? Okay, well, I want to thank both of you for being with us today and giving us an update. And I'm sure we're all thrilled to hear that your funds were matched. And we will look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Now, my PowerPoint disappeared, so bear with me and I'll see if I can get it back up again. Okay, here we go. So we're going to have a few updates this morning. First of all, I wanted to mention that our new docent class has completed its art training, and the final practice tour will be given today, and some of us had a chance to observe the practice tours last week, and our new docents are doing a phenomenal job. So we're really glad to see that. Dottie McGeorge still needs volunteers to lead the adult demo tours for the Printer's Proof. One of our teams stepped up to the plate and they're doing the young adult tour. And but Dottie would very much like to have somebody, either a team or an individual, step in and help with the adult demo tour. At this point, they're scheduled for February 28th and March 7th. And we'll keep you posted on that. Work has begun on the review of teams and the assignment of new docents. And we sent a memo out last week to all of our new docents asking for their top 3 preferences on teams. So if anybody has any thoughts about that, please get in touch with me. Pam and I will be meeting the week of January 3rd to talk about the actual teams. And so if you have any thoughts about that, suggestions, whatever, do let me know. Once again, I'm going to bring up, if you are interested in being considered for the assistant docent coordinator position, please be thinking about that. In the last KPASA, we had the process that we were using. Excuse me. If you look in chapter 6 of the handbook, You can get the job descriptions for all the positions, but we'd like all of you to be thinking ahead, not only for the assistant docent coordinator who would be working with Pam, but also for any of our committees or our committee chairs. And we'll be getting more information out on that after the first of the year, so you know exactly what we're looking at, but please think about it. I'd like to remind you that any change of status must be reported to Nancy Mattern by December 15th. And we will need that information as we look at the teams. We wanted to remind you that we do have some different days and times for holiday closures. Friday, December 24th, the museum will be closing at 3 p.m. Saturday, December 25th, the museum is closed on Christmas Day. Friday, December 31st, New Year's Eve, the museum closes at 3 p.m. And then on Saturday, January 1st, the museum will be closed. A reminder to everybody, I've had a couple of questions. Zoom meetings for our Monday training is going to be continuing through February of 2022. So we have a couple of more months for our morning training on Zoom, and we really hope that we'll be able to be back on site after that. Time will tell on that one, I guess. And Monday afternoon training is going to continue to be on site, and it is going to be for our new docents and docents from the last class. We have 9 members from the last class who are going to be going through history training with our new docents. And so we're delighted to see them, and we're looking forward to the history training. And finally, our docent rosters will be updated and distributed in January. And our first quarter schedule is just about over. December 20th, we are having our exhibit lecture on indelible blue. So I think we'll all find that interesting. On December 27th and January 3rd, there will be no training. Those are holidays. And other than that, we'll look forward to seeing everyone back on Zoom for Monday morning training on Monday, January 10th at 9:45. So any questions before we turn this over to Kathleen to introduce our speaker? Brenda?
I'm scheduled for the tour on the 31st at 2 o'clock. Should I go ahead and give that?
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think you could. I don't know how busy the museum is going to be that day. I do think we have an event that day that's going on, so there could very well be people. So if you're able to, that's great. I did hear from some who said they'll be out for the holidays, but we do advertise that we do have tours every day that the museum is open. So if you're not going to make it, let us know, but if you can make it, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm going to turn this over now to Kathleen, and she is going to introduce our speaker.
The focus of today's talk is on Pablo Abeita, and to refresh our memories for all of us who have given tours in the resource gallery of Only in Albuquerque. He is up there on the mural that you see as you enter the main room of the resource gallery. You lift your chin a little bit, and up top, Pablo Abeita is standing with some fellow members of Isleta Pueblo. Today, we are very favored in learning more about Pablo Abeita through his great-granddaughter. And as you know, Andrea or Dre Abeita excuse that interruption. Dre Abeita is the daughter of our former docent member, Rosalie Lucero, who was also Volunteer of the Year in 2018. So she comes from a long line of contributors. As I looked through her resume, I felt like I recognized 3 traits that she shared in common with her great-grandfather. First, well, I'll tell you the 3 traits. Number 1 is an emphasis on educational achievement. Number 2 is demonstrated leadership qualities. And number 3 is skill in communicating. Okay, so number 1, educational achievement. Pablo Abeita was born in 1870, and he attended the Old Town Jesuit School and went on to St. Michael's High School to accumulate 10 years of formal education, which was remarkable for those days. And his great-granddaughter, Dre Abeita, is equally remarkable. She graduated here in Albuquerque from St. Pius X High School. And then she went on to Dartmouth, where she graduated with a BA in Indian Studies and History, a good basis. Then in 2008, she attained a master's in language, literacy, and sociocultural studies here at UNM. And now she's in her 9th year as a PhD candidate in the same field, language, literature, and sociocultural studies. So you see the pattern when it comes to education. Also, in leadership qualities, you probably know that Pablo Abeita was governor several times of Isleta Pueblo. He was a war chief. He served on the All Indian Council, which was a newly created organization, or a renewed creation, because it existed under the Spanish. But while at UNM, Dre has accumulated 5 years of being a leader in her graduate student community. She has been president of, the Society of Native American Graduate and Undergraduate Students. And this past year, she was elected chairman of the Graduate Student Council of the Association of American Educational Research. It's really AERA, American Educational Research Association. I think that more regionally, it has a membership of about 7,000, but around the world, it's an international organization as well, with 10 to 15,000 members. So this is quite a leadership achievement of Dre's. And then finally, they share a skill at communication. I don't know if you've ever read much about Pablo Abeita, but he worked as a typesetter for the Albuquerque Journal for about 5 years after he finished his schooling. And as a result, he felt anytime that it was called for, he would write a letter to the newspaper and express his opinion. He did not shirk from expressing his opinion, as a matter of fact, and that's another story. So we have skill as communication showing up in Andrea's career as well. She has already served in 38 leadership and institutional service positions. And when it comes to communicating, she's participated in 32 panels of academic research and institutional service organizations as well. So this woman raises our eyebrows, and we are so lucky to have her today. Andrea.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm honored to be here, our Albuquerque Museum docent family. I am Dre Abeita, Coyote walking in this world, real life Isleta Pueblo superhero. I am also proud to be a two-spirited Indigenous warrior. I have roots from not only Isleta, but Laguna, Acoma, and the Philippines. And when I say two-spirited warrior family, I have a female self and a male self. When I am Indigenous, however, my female self comes out, and I honor all of our mothers who have come before us, our grandmothers who are culture keepers and who really hold our family. They're at the heart of our families today. Thank you so much, family, for joining me. I am honored to be here to present on my great-great-grandfather, Pablo Abeita. But to be completely honest, I am an academic, a critical race, whiteness, intersectional, revolutionary scholar. My background is actually in YPAR, youth participatory action research. I'm a vlogger with 18,000 followers on 7 social media platforms as part of my doctoral dissertation project, meaning that I share my daily life with the world as a survivor of trauma, PTSD. I share my survivor stories of rape and molestation as a child due to ramifications of Indian boarding schools, as well as, excuse me, family. As well as my experience with police brutality in 2008, as well as a white male academic predator in 2018 that made me suicidal and questioned my place in academia. So I use my life experiences, the stories, my family's love and support, and I share it with the world in the hope that we create some humanizing change. And family, I grew up learning about my ancestor, Pablo Abeita, hearing about his revolutionary stories and how he changed the world. And those are some big shoes to fill. Thank you again to my mama. I call her my mama bear on social media to keep her privacy, but you all know her as Rosalie Lucero. She is the light of my world. And between her and my Gammy, I can do anything, and my partner as well. So thank you so much, family. In addition to all of the roles that I have in society and communities, AERA, the American Education Research Association, we are 30 to 35,000 around the world, 7,000 are graduate students, 10 to 15,000 come to our conference. It is in April, and I'm begging people to come in person. So if you know anyone in education, please send them my way. But that's how we change the world, as Pablo literally used education, he used the spoken word, he used being in the community, his wealth. He used literally every superpower he had at his disposal to try to make sure that Indigenous life was respected, that our land rights were respected, and that even the colonization through religion, he was very critical when he was talking about colonizers who came to the Pueblos and was asking them to see our way of life in a humanizing light. So he was the revolutionary, and as a critical race scholar, we always go to history in order to understand the world. But in addition to that, family, I am also a pastor of Coyote's Lodge, House of Spirituality, Critical Race Theory, and Medical Marijuana. And when we pray, family, we literally just say hello to our ancestors. So every presentation that I do in this world, when I'm official, I wear my traditional dress in an attempt to decolonialize and to claim space for Indigenous people around the world. But I also honor my ancestors and say hello. So if you do not pray, family, that is okay. If you could just close your eyes and set an intention for your day, I would ask you to join us in this moment to feed our spirits. Gammy, it's your favorite trickster coyote grandchild. I know, it's me. And I'm here doing your work, and I am here to celebrate one of our ancestors, but I'm also honoring you as one of my original warrior women. Dear Gammy, you stood tall, and you gave us strength, and you made sure we got an education, even though you used a big wooden spoon. But you made sure every single of your children got a master's degree. My mama, you know, she did PhD coursework, and you made sure we'd have a fight to place in this world. And we've been fighting ever since, Gammy, and you made sure your grandchildren and great-grandchildren would have opportunity. So please allow all the people here the same blessings. May they find some role models. May they be those role models to all of our girls and boys and citizens today. As we walk the path that you set before us, Gammy, thank you for your blessings and allow our people the strength and courage to get work done. Thank you, and may you rest in peace. Dear Papa, I miss you. You were all love and tortillas and newspapers and sunshine. You worked the fields and you always took the time to listen to us and to care for us. And you taught us the power of family. So dear Papa, although COVID affects all of our lives, let us find some safety and security like you provided for us. Send your blessings, Papa, and may you rest hereafter. And to my great-great-grandpa, Pablo Abeita, true revolutionary and Isleta Pueblo statesman, you walked with presidents, sir, and you wrangled with the government, and you ensured our people had a voice. Allow those blessings upon our people now. Allow our leaders to rise up and use the tools of honesty, use the tools of compassion and empathy to change this world. To all of our ancestors who have gone before us, both blood and adopted, who have treated us with kindness and respect as human beings, may you send your blessings on us as your community members as we walk the path that you set before us. Thank you, family. The one thing that all of these experiences have taught me is that you have to look to your family and you have to look to your ancestors to really truly understand how to be at peace and at balance in the world today. And my great-great-grandfather was a man before his time. He was a revolutionary and he pushed the boundaries of what was humanly possible. And as we go through his story today in true Indigenous fashion, which means, family, that we are going to tell his life through stories. And as a true academic, I also have to do my research and tell his lives through what we remember. So what I pieced together with the help of my amazing mama, who pieced articles, literally went to archives, went to the journal, went to Indian boarding schools to look at the records for our family history. So what we're doing today, family, is using the broader timeline of his life. We're going to look at historical artifacts to piece together and couple that with our traditional stories, my family stories of hearing about this incredible man who decades later still marks our lives. So, Pablo Abeita, born February 10th, 1870, and died December 17th, 1941. So this is what they said about him. Pablo was one of the village's most prominent and famed residents. He was a familiar figure on the streets of Albuquerque with his broad-brimmed hat, topping his long hair that fell below his shoulders, his lace-yoked red-trimmed shirt and blanket that clung to his shoulders as if by magic. And this is one of the pictures we have of him. Sorry, family. It is an emotional thing to revisit history because you're celebrating where you came from as well as remembering. So, how am I related to him? My paternal family tree. So these are my great-great-grandparents. So Pablo Abeita was married to Marie Dolores Zuni Abeita, and these were their children: Jose Andres Andy Abeita, which is my relative, Juan Ray John Abeita, Jose Simon Abeita, Remijo Abeita, and Ambrosio Abeita. So my great-grandparents were Jose Andres Andy Abeita, and he was born in April 16, 1916 to July 16, 1986. And he married my great-grandmother, Margaret Carpio. And they got married in the 1930s, and these were their children: Pablo Abeita, Emily, Catalina, Virginia, Richard, who is my grandfather, Jose, Richard, and Simon. So Pablo Abeita is my great-great-grandfather. Jose Andres Andy Abeita is my great-grandfather. And Richard Abeita is my grandfather. I'm sorry, family. I'm still... Mama, what was grandmother's legal name? Richard was married to...
Got Muggy?
No, Richard... I'm sorry, family. My grandmother's name, she was a Filipino grandmother. And to be completely honest, I was raised by the Jojolas. So I was estranged from my Abeita family when I was 2 years old. So a lot of the family history that I learned was through my Jojola Histia family. I will get back to you on that family. So Andy Abeita is my father, and they got divorced when I was 2. And so I have 2 mothers, Rosalie Lucero, whom you know, and her sister, Lynn Connor, who is technically my birth mother. So she's formerly Abeita. She is the one who married into the Abeita family, which is how I ended up being an Abeita. And then I have my amazing and wonderful stepdad, who's married to my mother, Lynn Connor. And then there's me and my partner, Neil Shear. So even though today's presentation is about my paternal family, I need to always acknowledge my maternal family. So this is my Gammy, who is the light of my whole world, whom we lost over the last couple of years doing my program, as well as my papa, Andres Histia and Miguelita Histia. And these are the parents of Rosalie Lucero and Lynn Connor. So let's go back in time, family, and let us go to history. So when Pablo Abeita was born, it's literally February 10th, 1870. And I want you to take a look at these pictures of Isleta. And I want you to think back to a time period where literally there's no electricity, where everyone is walking. There are horses and buggies if you're lucky enough. You might have seen an automobile, but they're not. It's more of a fantasy, a story. But the daily life in the tribe literally is getting water from wells, walking everywhere, and it's a farming community. So this is the community that he's born into, but he's also born in privilege. Sorry, family. Which is something that I always critique in my work, because we have to know the resources and tools that we come to the table with. So Pablo Abeita was born into a family that had had property. So this is a quote. His family was a prosperous one. The grandfather had loaned the territorial government $18,000 during the Civil War to pay the militia. So let's think about this family. Although this is a farming community, although most people are traveling by horse and buggy, we also have to reflect on his positionality. What type of family, Pueblo Indian family in 1870 has that type of wealth? To literally $18,000 at that time would be millions now. So we have to put that in perspective when we look at his privilege when he goes to school. Our family was very influential again because it came from the land. So the land was key, and he used that power later when he's advocating for us via the land rights. So when he advocates to get the crest redone and we get more land, our land back, hashtag land back, he was very instrumental in that role. So his education, this photo on your right, family, is literally, if you look at the top right here, the first entry is Pablo Abeita. And sorry, I gotta look at my glasses, family. I'm getting close to the screen. So it literally says it says Abeita Pablo, tribe Isleta. He's 13 years old. He's male, and he entered the school in April. And this is a roster from the Albuquerque Indian School family. So again, this was due to the amazing work of my mother, Rosalie Lucero, who went to the archives and literally did research on our family. And that is very unique and tragic that Native Americans have the ability to go through these boarding schools and find our ancestors and look up those histories. So as Kathleen stated earlier, he learned his ABCs in the Old Town School. Pablo Abeita, he was, the next quote is referring to the picture to our right as an artifact. He had a classic education under the Jesuit fathers. He was fluent in English, Spanish, and his native Tiwa family. But as we know, his command of English and the written word was what was really so significant about him. He was published multiple times in English newspapers, family. There was a book that he was working on. We will see a newspaper clipping article on that later. But that was revolutionary for his time period. A lot of the later works that he was published are around the time of his death. But it shows in this day of era that was very colonized as well, where Native Americans were still heavily controlled by troops and secluded on reservations and impoverished situations, that he had so much influence and that he was very revolutionary. And how much courage it took, going back to the title of my presentation, family, my courageous ancestor literally used as my current critical race theory walking as Coyote says, his superpowers, his super tools were rooted in education, were rooted in his command of the literary word. And he is, again, a graduate of St. Michael's College in Santa Fe, and he was awarded an honorary Master's of Ancient History and a Doctor of Philosophy, just like this Coyote soon will have. Family tree. So what was his daily life like? To support his wife and his 5 sons, Abeita ran a small general store. He farmed, and he also was the postmaster for Isleta. He read books steadily, he wrote to newspapers on the issues of the day, and he lectured in Spanish and English. We're going to get to his formal roles in a few more slides to talk about actually in more detail the huge influence that he had not only on the government and the state policy and the national policy for Indian country in a second. But to the right here, this comes from the Isleta newsletter, and they actually have been doing pieces on historical figures. So this comes from our newsletter. So this is Juan Batista Zuni, Pablo Abeita in the middle, and Marcelina Abeita from 1918. Let's get into his official leadership and his official roles. So according to Simmons, he was also the governor of the Pueblo of Isleta, a war captain from the Pueblo of Isleta. He also was a representative on the All Pueblo Council of Governors, and he was one of the judges for the Court of Indian Offenses. It was a court that was only raised for a short period of time, but again, he was one of the 3 that was picked to serve on that. He was also the postmaster, which he held, and also had a store. And again, during this time period, having your own store meant a lot of wealth, but it also made you a very influential person in the community. So Pablo Abeita, outstanding Pueblo leader, judge, Indian spokesman before presidents, and one of the founders of the Cattle Trust for the benefits of his people. So again, he used his education to advocate for cattle rights, for land rights, and we'll talk later in his the public mind in his article, where he literally takes on religion. So again, going back to him being courageous, the picture on the right is talking about him writing a book on Isleta. Unfortunately, family, we have looked in our history, we have looked in my family, and we could not find a manuscript. So that is still a mystery. So here we go. There's another photo of him. He's a true, fearless, and courageous advocate and revolutionary. He held every office in the Pueblo's government, serving as secretary and member of the tribal council until his death at the age of 78. He was also a prominent judge for the All Indian Pueblo Court. He was a mover and organizer for the All Pueblo Council in 1922, and he led the fight against legislation which was designed to break up Indian collective land holdings. He was against dam construction programs which would injure Indian lands. So basically, he's taking on huge policy at the time, family. This is what our leaders do. And he is the example that, we try to continue to today, but literally at this time period, he was negotiating with the federal government on behalf of Indian country. That is amazing. I just cannot talk about how revolutionary that is. The next quote is, he was friendly to the white man, but did not hesitate to take him down, verbally or in his letters to the press when the white man oversteps his mark. Again, he is critical. He's using his brilliant mind. He's using his language. He's using the honesty of his work. When we listen to some of his articles in a few moments, you'll literally hear the passion and the honesty that comes through when he's talking. Family story. Okay, so this is another photo, family, of Pablo Abeita. So the family story is that he basically kidnapped a president. So Roosevelt, and then there's a newspaper article. So this is the family story. We're gonna go to the family story first, and then we're gonna go to the newspaper article. But the family story is that he went, it wasn't the Alvarado, or I think it was Alvarado. So he basically gets a wagon, he goes to the hotel where the president is, and they're friends. They've been talking for a while. So like he was friends with presidents. That's the family history. And so he takes a wagon, he goes to the hotel, and he like smuggles him out. And he kidnaps him, and they have a great time, and the Secret Service hates him and all this other stuff, but they go on an adventure, and they literally are human people, right? The president of the United States and this Native American, this Indian man at the time, as we were called, right, are having a human moment and an adventure, right? How many times did the president like sneak off? Anyways, it was a huge uproar. It's part of our family history, it's part of our family lore, and very exciting. So this is the official account, family. So walked with presidents. In 1930s, Abeita liked to remind people that he was the only living Indian who had met each of the presidents of the United States, starting with Grover Cleveland in 1886 and continuing through the sitting president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was also a personal friend of members of Congress, having made trips to Washington, D.C. to argue on behalf of Indian issues. He conferred in Washington, D.C. with 4 different presidents on Indian problems: Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, and Roosevelt. I'm just saying, family, I think that's pretty revolutionary and courageous. I don't know, presidents excluded, but how many people, how many civil rights leaders? I would even argue that he was a civil rights leader because he was fighting for Indian land rights. He was fighting for our rights of our peoples, had that kind of access to presidents, sitting presidents during their actual time, during their 4 years. The next one is a newspaper. Oh, sorry, family. While in the nation's, okay, so this is the actual account of what happened to the kidnapping story, right? So I shared the personal family account. This is what the newspaper said. While in the nation's capital in 1901, he had a private interview with Teddy Roosevelt. The president was so charmed that he promised to visit Isleta on his next swing through New Mexico. Months later, Abeita received word that the commander-in-chief was at the Alvarado Hotel in Albuquerque and wanted to see him. So he hitched up his wagon and team and drove 13 miles to town. Roosevelt told his Indian friend to take him to Isleta, but noted they would have to sneak out of the hotel to get away from the Secret Service agents. They did, and the pair spent a wonderful day at the Pueblo. That evening, Abeita parked his wagon in front of the Alvarado and had Roosevelt wrap up in an Indian blanket so he could get into the lobby in disguise. Inside, however, they encountered bedlam. Agents were racing about in panic because the president had disappeared. In the crowded lobby, Abeita let out an Indian war whoop, then snatched away the blanket to reveal the identity of his companion. The Secret Service was not amused. I feel joy when I read that. I can feel the humor. I can feel the trickster coming out. And that's what I am, family. I'm a real life Isleta Pueblo superhero. I'm a coyote and I'm a trickster. And it all comes from my ancestors. The image on your right is a blurb about him. So he was interesting and people interviewed him. So Pablo Abeita sits and talks to the newsreel people. And back in the day, the newsreel, I'm sorry, speaking to the choir of course, they would do news stories about interesting figures and they would document what was happening. So the newsreel men had made their first story in Albuquerque's A Personality of Pablo Abeita, noted Indian philosopher of Isleta. Pablo compared the white man to the Indian, giving the Indian philosophy of that of happiness and content. He said that he had been back east and was well acquainted with the white man's civilization, and through the medium of the talking newsreel, invited those of the cities to come west to the great open space and live as the great spirit intended man should live. So now we're going to go ahead briefly into some controversies, family, because as a revolutionary who it takes courage to take on institutions, take on presidents, you literally are also taking on your tribe. I know this from personal experience, family. You are seen as an outsider. The more that you interact, the more that you try to influence, you can be seen as a traitor to your own kind. So this was also true for Pablo Abeita. In the back, you're seeing the image in the back of that is another article about him that came out in this newsletter. There, family. I'm also having allergies today. Goodness. Okay, so let's talk about some of his controversies. Every revolutionary is also someone's enemy, family. Remember that. So, public advocate and published author. Genial and friendly, Pablo did not hesitate to take issues when matters affecting the welfare of Indians was under discussion. He wrote letters to the press when the occasion arose to correct what he termed misstatements of Indian history or criticize the policies of the Indian Bureau or of the white men in general. So again, he used his wonderful voice to advocate for our people, and that was power. As much as we see social media, which is why my project is focused on that, we've seen the power of social media. back then the media powerhouse was newspaper. So the op-eds that he was writing, the way that he was publishing, the critiques that he was making were revolutionary and very, very influential at the time. So the first controversy is the Charles Loomis Pueblo folktales. And again, anthropologists were not as sensitive with doing research. We did not have a lot of protections as we did before. And so they were friends. So Charles Loomis and Pablo Abeita were friends. So a couple times he was censured by village elders. First, they accused him of giving tribal secrets to his friend, the author Charles F. Loomis, who included some of them in his book, Pueblo Folktales. Abeita brought up the matter when Loomis visited Isleta about 1916, saying your publication was very much resented here. The writer contritely apologized and admitted he should have sought permission. The friendship of the two men survived this episode. That is fortunate because a young member of the family bore the name Loomis Abeita. So family, let's kind of deconstruct this a little bit. So yes, Charles Loomis came in and he published Indian tales. That is controversial, especially considering during this time period, Native American communities are enslaved, basically, right? We've gone through 2 waves of colonization. If you're a Pueblo, we had Spanish conquistadors first, and then we had American colonization with boarding schools second. So our historic stories, our ways of knowing, how did we teach our children, right? Pueblo folk stories aren't folk stories. They're where our indigenous epistemologies and ontologies is what we call them in academia, but it's the way we walk through the world, it's our way of knowing. So for Native American people, for a white author, right, researcher, right, to come and take our sacred stories and publish them, one, as if they're just children's tales, and 2, you took them, right? So there was a backlash that Pablo faced because of that. And that's still a controversy in academia now. We could talk about that more. And I don't know what is the right thing, right? As a revolutionary person, you want to work with your white family, right? That's what I do. I work with white allies. Well, a huge chunk of my consulting work has to do with the creation of white allies. So he was reaching out and trying to forge relationships. But again, we have to learn how to do that in a humanizing manner. So that's the first controversy that really surrounds Pablo Abeita. The next one, the public mind family. I want to read this to you. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm going to read some of the critique. So again, making the argument of courageous revolutionary. He's literally talking about Collier, who's being attacked during this time, during the Indian education era, last hundreds of years, right? And there's different periods of time. During Collier's era, he actually is trying to rehumanize Indian schooling. And so you're allowed to start speaking your native language again. You're starting to see more reflections of our culture in Collier's Indian schools. And so he's coming under attack by the general white public at this time, who are saying, oh, well, you're just allowing those Indians to be pagan again, right? So this is a critique that Pablo Abeita is giving in backlash of that. So the public mind, Pueblo of Isleta, New Mexico. Please, I would like to answer a statement which came out of your paper under the date June 17th, made by some missionaries from Rehoboth, New Mexico, wherein they charged Mr. Collier, Commissioner of Indian Affairs, of promoting paganism among Indians. Of course, I don't know what sort of faith or sect these missionaries represent, or whether they represent one God, or each of them his own God. I have heard several so-called missionaries talk, and no two talk alike. Each one roasts the other about his belief, so that maybe each one has his own God. But what have you good and zealous missionaries to show that you are not pagan? Do you know your God? Have you ever seen him, or had a good heart-to-heart? If your teaching is so good and true, and the Indian religion or paganism, why not leave the Indian alone? You missionaries have been among the Indians ever since I can remember, way back 50 or 60 years, teaching your religion to us Indians. How many converts have you by now? What have you missionaries done to improve or disprove our paganism? I am afraid that if you stay another 50 years doing the same amount of work among us pagan Indians, you will be a better pagan than the Indian himself. Don't try to make the Indian believers that which you yourselves don't believe. And if you did believe, you could not prove it. That what you say about the earth our mother, the sun a polished brass shield, etc., is what you have been told and you have learned, and great missionaries do believe it. Oh, you are very poor fish to believe such things. You who are supposed to teach the Indian what is wrong and what is right, and how to go to heaven and not to the other place, if there is one, and you may say there is, and then to get scared and excited because some other Indian says that our earth, our mother, and the sun is a polished brass shield. Why not exchange places with the Indian? I believe the Indian would do better than you have done in the last 50 years. I rather believe that you missionaries are getting stale in your places. I'm afraid that in a few more years, you will have clean forgotten what your mission with the Indian was for or for who. Clean up and polish the old golden rule and abide by it, and let the golden rule or silver rule to one side. I have heard a lot of people say that the golden rule has its 3 strikes and then it's out for good. And in the place is now the silver rule, the silver dollar, which is never out, not even in 33 strikes. And if ever the silver dollar is out, everyone will be out. Even you missionaries will be out. If the silver dollar is not forthcoming, then I bet my old hat that you will not stay and try to save the poor Indian. Don't give the Indian something for nothing. Show him how to make a living with and from his own work. And don't tell him that he will go to HEEHELL if you don't tell him what to do. And don't blame Mr. Collier for the Indian's paganism. Clean your own home and premises first, and turn your head and see what your neighbors is doing, and then correct him if need be. And don't believe everything that your half-converted client tells you. That was July 1st, 1936, family. And that was a scathing critique, revolutionary, brutally honest. But during this day of age, Native American communities are being overrun and ravaged by missionaries who are not only stealing their land, right? Because yes, there were missionaries who were there to convert, but at the same time, conversion means a loss of Native culture, it means a loss of Native language, and it means a loss of Native way of life. In addition to this, family, the history long proves that these time periods and waves of missionary work was also coinciding with the stealing of Native land. So they would also be taking Native land from reservations at this time as well. So he's not only critiquing the cultural, linguistic way of life attack that is represented by converting to Christian religions during this time period, but also how this is affecting our communities. Okay, the second controversy, family, is the naming of the Chemo Theater. And I know we have about 10 minutes before we have a break, so let's go ahead and see if we can finish this up. So the second incident that caused him some problems was the naming of the Chemo Theater. So it was a contest, right? In 1927, there was a contest to name the new movie theater in Albuquerque. It's on the corner of Central and Fifth in an elaborate Pueblo revival style. The theater needed an appropriate Southwestern moniker. Abeita's entry, Chemo, was won hands down. In the Tiwa language, the word was said to mean king of its kind. But the religious hierarchy of Isleta, according to one report, took him severely to task for not getting clearance first for submitting it as the name of the theater. Okay, so this has been also a huge controversy in Isleta. So first of all, Chemo doesn't mean king of its kind. My mom and I had a very long conversation about this. There's no king. Like, we don't have a word for king, okay? There's no king, there's no hierarchies, tribes didn't have kings. And this goes back to like the linguistic modernity argument, right? So even in the Dene language, they now have words for like Starbucks because they use their traditional language to come up with new words. So language is complicated. And the myth and what the newspapers say is that his entry was Chemo means king of his kind. But in Tiwa, Chemo means really mountain lion. So it is a well-known word. I'm not sure how history got rewritten with that, But hey, you know what? I think my great-great-grandfather was a bit of a trickster. So king of its kind. Let me think, family. If you're entering a naming contest and you're gonna give some words to some white people who don't speak your language, what sounds better on the application? King of its kind? Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so just so you know, family, Chimo means mountain lion, not king of its kind. Oh, and to go back to why he got in trouble. Yes, he would get in trouble. One, he's already in trouble because he's dealing with the white world in general, right? He's in the newspapers, he's visiting presidents, he's in politics, he's messing with land grants, he's in the Indian Pueblo Council Center, he's doing all of these things. So yes, anytime he's putting his little head out, it's going to be controversial and he's going to get in trouble with the tribal leaders at home. So that's the other thing to understand. He's not so much a troublemaker, because I know a family, but when you tend to become popular, when you become the revolutionary, become the leader, you will be critiqued. And history is written. We have to, it's not, he wasn't a vlogger. He didn't take videos like I do every single day. So what we're doing is we're having to repiece his life back together. But what he did leave behind, what people do remember, and what was recorded down in history. So when he seems so controversial because, of this, that, or the other in the paper, you have to also understand this is only, one thing of all the thousands of things that he did for our peoples. So, take the Chimo controversy with a grain of salt, right? The Loomis controversy with a grain of salt, because the critique that he's getting from the tribe is he is not traditional, right? If he was traditional, he wouldn't be talking to white people. He wouldn't be talking to presidents. He wouldn't be writing newspapers. So anytime you're seen as other, you will be critiqued and criticized. The next one I want to share with you guys, this is a great one, Geronimo. So this is an article by Pablo Abeita, and it was published in the Albuquerque Journal. So Geronimo, he was 79 years old, and his lifespan was between June 16th, 1829 to February 17th, 1909. He was a prominent leader and medicine man from the Bidokohi band of Apache people, and he was imprisoned by the U.S. government until his death at Fort Sill in 1909. So Pablo Abeita got to meet with him and talk with him and get his story and talk to him tribal leader to tribal leader. Oh, sorry, family. That text, the Chimo, is meant to be on the slide. That's my apologies. But I want you to think about that. Pablo Abeita got to talk to Geronimo, and he was trying to find solutions of this another revolutionary leader. So let's take a look, family. Geronimo, Isleta, New Mexico. All right, Mr. R.M. Edwards, if you think this article as that of A.E.A. Hines and of mine is going to help the Colorado event, I'll let it out of my old thinking box because there's plenty. You called old Geronimo the peace-loving emancipator. He sure had a reason, a good one too, for being such a bad hombre. I had a long talk with the old man, Geronimo, in Fort Sill in 1905 when I visited him. Captain Dade, who was in charge of Fort Sill, gave me permission to visit him and talk with him. The story he told me would be very interesting for those who would call him bloodthirsty. He was not sorry for what he did, as he knew that the other side or party was not sorry for what they did. I wrote and pleaded for him and for his people to President Teddy Roosevelt to allow Geronimo's people to come back to their old home. But the president told me that their old homeland was now all taken up, and there was no more room for them in their old home country in Arizona. However, those who wanted to come and join the Mescaleros in New Mexico were given their freedom. I understand they're all doing fine in their new home. You white people have a saying you call Indian giver. Oh, that is all right, we say. Treat the Indian right, and he will treat just as good. Treat him wrong, and see what he does to you. We are not inviting Eastern people to come to New Mexico. You whites are doing it, and when they do come and spend a few cents buying a few pots from the Indians, okay. So again, this is a scathing critique, not only on the imprisonment of Geronimo. We still have revolutionary leaders who are in prison today. There's a recent rallying cry against, releasing Leonard Pelletier, who was one of our AIM activists from the American Indian Civil Rights Movement. Just likewise, as people are calling for his release, Pablo Abeita, during this time period, is advocating for Geronimo's release, for the Apache people to be able to return to the land that was stolen to them, only to be told that that is impossible. Only to be told that, yes, we hold you in bondage and imprisoned literally by US troops, but we will let you go if you will give up your land. So again, he is a courageous revolutionary family who used his political power, his ingenuity, his brilliant mind, and his command of the English language to advocate for Indian rights. The last slide I have for you today is his death. So he joined our ancestors' family on December 17th. Shoot, family, hold on. I want to get this right. I need to get this right. December 17th, 1941. So December 17th, 1941, or 1940. When he died suddenly of a heart attack on December 17, 1940, the local press reported in bold letters that the grand old man of Isleta was gone. Upon his passing, Abeita was wrapped in a bright Indian blanket that he had long before selected as his burial robe. He was laid to rest with proper Pueblo rituals in a cemetery south of the village. So again, my ancestor was a revolutionary, courageous leader of not only American Indian rights, but of our Pueblo, of our tribe, of our state. He negotiated with presidents, and I'm honored to be one of his ancestors. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for allowing me to present in this space today.
Thank you very much, Dre. Great presentation. And I think we'll take about a 5-minute break now, and then we'll come back and see if anybody has any questions. Okay.
Access to, I think, Collier at the time and stuff like that, that got them. Yeah, the Isleta kids were being held like for the 3 or 4 years they'd be up here at school. They were not allowed to go home. And he thought that was bad, and he got it done. So I think
I don't think it was just Loomis, though. I mean, we had been trying for decades to get our children out of the grasp of Indian boarding schools. So during the Indian boarding school era, we have no control over our children.
Auspices that it happened. I think it's, as you say, Pablo is looked at as being controversial and whatnot. And of course, Loomis could not be more controversial than he was, but there are good things that he did. And I think that perhaps it would be a little more equal if Pueblo people would find that out.
What does that mean? Are you saying that we have to learn about white people's contributions to us?
Because Loomis is probably, anybody that knows about him in Isleta thinks that was a horrible thing.
Oh, no. What we're critiquing.
He did a lot of good for the Indian people.
I'm glad that he helped us. But at the same part, you have to understand the colonial context. You're telling me as a white person that Indian people should learn more about the white people who helped them in our past. That's kind of patronizing. And I wish that all white people would learn about all the Indian people who contributed.
What about the other way around, Dre? Is that not patronizing?
What, that you should all learn about
Learn more about.
Absolutely. Right. That's critical race theory. I'm fighting so people learn about Pablo Abeita. Like, right. Loomis did help. I'm glad he helped. No, and yes, we have to look at his critique more individually, but you have to be careful when you say, yeah, you guys have to really think about how Loomis affected.
She really loves Charles Loomis. Can I say something?
Sure.
Well, I noticed the most amazing thing, having read about Charles Loomis I've also seen a lot of pictures and I've noticed the way he dressed. He was imitating the way Pablo dressed, with the woven belt around his waist and the short coat, and even the pants have the same stripe that that Loomis adopted. And if we're going to talk about a controversial person, Loomis was a controversial person. And after reading a bunch of books about him, I saw that he did some really useful things, but I did not like him. I don't think he treated his wives decently at all. Okay. I have another question. I was wondering when the Bursum bill, what came about, was that in something like 1939? And I know that Pablo died in 1941. And I was just wondering if he had any involvement.
That's something that I would definitely have to do more research on. Today was more of an overview from the familial and then what we could piece together. So as an academic, I cannot know everything about a person. And again, this was a prepared presentation for you all, which is amazing. But for the facets of what I tried to do today was to give you an overview of what I could present from firsthand accounts or from family stories. So I didn't have any, like for the Bursum bill or the Indian Voting Rights Act. Okay, so just historically too, the Voting Rights Act for Native Americans was 1924, but we didn't actually get the legal right to like be able to physically vote until like the 1950s, because they also had, just like the South had all of these Jim Crow laws, the rest of the country also had their own versions of Jim Crow laws to keep Native Americans. So they would tie the idea of taxes because natives don't own land, or because we didn't pay taxes, they kept us out of voting as Native people to the 1950s. And it wasn't until we got the wave of World War II and veterans coming home and natives actually in uniform that they were actually able to vote. So just so you guys know, like, yes, we have these time periods of laws, but when it comes in actual practicality, we didn't have those same rights. And Pablo's ability to walk in these circles had to go with his wealth and his education and part of his personality. I can literally walk into any space because of my background and be able to fit in and talk because of the training. It takes millions of dollars to create one Dre Abeita, Ivy League schools and European trips and all of these experiences. To create one Pablo Abeita, he was the same. He had all these experiences. He got to go to all these schools and he had lands and connections and money, right? For his family to have $18,000 to be able to lend for the Civil War. They're billionaires of the time, right? Literally, we're talking about, I don't know, who are billionaires now? I don't pay attention to famous people, but whoever are billionaires, that's who Pablo Abeita really was. And that we don't really understand that the amazing things that he was able to do, a lot of that comes with the time period as well. Like, people aren't doing what he's doing. They're not talking the politics he's doing. No one was able to do what he was able to do. But I can ask like general questions or something specific on the articles. But if you're asking me about a law or if he did something particular for a movement, I unfortunately do not have that information.
Well, for the Cuatrocentenario, which would be like the 400th anniversary, you know, they were working on the Coronado Monument, and you referenced that. But I read a comment he made. There was a series of speakers, and I don't think he talked for maybe more than 2 or 3 minutes. But what he did say was that he was going to contradict what the previous speakers had said about how wonderful Coronado had been. And he said he came to Isleta and we treated him royally and fed him and his people. And then he went up the rest of the valley, and you know how that turned out. And I know that a bunch of us docents have gone on a field trip where we saw you could literally pick up from the ground the remains of those, I'll call them bullets, when they attacked that pueblo, which was situated along Coors. So we know about the subsequent battles. And it just was such an interesting example to me of how Pablo spoke truth to power.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there was another question in the chat from Mike about how many times he was elected governor. The records aren't clear. I was trying to piece it together from the newspapers. They said he had several roles. Some accounts said that he had had every position within the government. But again, during these time periods, there aren't records. Even now, right? You're trying to find the council. I've been doing our tribal membership has changed. It used to be half. Now it's a quarter. So I was trying to look up laws. Even now, it's hard to find government documents. So to look for historic documents from the Pueblo of Isleta that actually has our list of governors in order, those are really hard. It's very difficult to say exactly how many times he was governor. Many of the accounts say several times. So I'm taking that to be more than twice. He also had, the war captain, the post office. He was on the courts, the All-Indo Pueblo Council. Those ones are more well documented, but the Pueblo's own records on her own government officials are not very well documented. In addition, there's a lot of his work that's missing. So there was a book, a manuscript, and notes that disappeared. So that's part of also the family lore, family history, is that his personal stuff is gone, or that personal manuscript is gone. Oh, and thank you so much to Barbara, who looked it up. 18,000 would be equivalent to 380K today. So think about that, family. For a private family's own holding to have the ability to just be like, here, government, 380,000. That kind of really puts it into perspective. But again, I mean, look at really what he did. And you have to put it in the context of during the time period. He wasn't just, right, a controversial figure. He actually affected policy and individual people's lives. And I'm literally going to be spending the rest of my life learning more about this family. It's on my list. As soon as I finish my dissertation, y'all. I'm really proposing right now.
Do we have any other questions? Well, Dre, again, we want to thank you so much for giving us your time today. And it really was a great presentation, and say hello to your mom for us.
I will. Thank you all so much. Have a great morning.
Okay, bye. Before we close, do we have any other questions for Elizabeth? I noticed somebody had asked about the gift shop discount. Elizabeth, do you know anything about that? Still don't.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought the foundation was going to address that today. They haven't said anything to me. I do know that they're working on some sort of coupon or something, but I don't know the specifics.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Well, okay, we're gonna end a little bit early today, and we'll see some of you this afternoon for our practice tours from our new docents, and the rest of you we'll see next Monday on Zoom.